integrations that Selenium base provides. There are a couple of integration points that makes the framework much more rich in terms of implementation. Uh, I can see. Okay. Uh, and the other thing that I'm gonna do one more time is spin up the Jenkins instance. I see a lot of questions regarding they're not able to find the correct application Jenkins on Azure, and they're not able to spin up those instances. So I'll create one more Jenkins instance. I'll go through it how to create it, and then I won't go through the plugins that are Shining Panda and Tox plugin. You can refer to the previous video on CI/CD implementation. It's pretty much the same. Uh, so we'll not go through it, but I'm going to resolve some of the people having issues with spinning up Jenkins instance on Azure. The second part I'm going to talk about is the integrations. I'm going to specifically what I'm going to do a demo on is create an execution platform uh, for Selenium Base, where you create a UI to run Selenium Base test. This becomes very powerful addition in framework where you give the execution control not just to your team but outside your team as well. So anyone who has access to that web page will be able to execute test, right? So that's the beauty of that UI, that you're empowering users to actually execute the test and get the results back, right? Now the idea is that what happens is the right framework is when you are not doing the execution, right? When the person who has created the framework and created the test is not doing the execution, but either it's deployed in a pipeline, or or someone outside the group has the power to execute those tests, right? Uh, Currently, when you write Selenium tests, it's very rare that anyone outside your group will actually execute those tests, right? And get a feedback at that point. So right now, let's say if I'm a developer and I'm developing something, and I want to see uh, if my commit is successful or not, I can either put it in the deployment pipeline. I can add that test in the dev pipeline, right? Where whenever he is doing a commit, it automatically triggers the automated test and gets a feedback instantly on either Teams or Slack, right? So we also discussed last time about the Teams integration through Jenkins. So again, I will not go through that one more time. I'll keep it concise. You can obviously refer back to uh, the previous session on CI/CD to get uh, details on how to do integrate with team app or Slack, right? And then another thing that I want to talk about is not just the execution platform, but the containerization of Selenium Base, where you can actually go and containerize your whole test suite to run it on any server, right? The idea of containerizing Selenium best test is that you don't have a CI/CD tool. If you don't have a CI/CD tool, the best way to go about is to create uh, test-based containers, right? The where your source code, where your container image already has the source code, as well as all the dependencies required to run those particular containers. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is let's look at the integration points that Selenium Base provides. So the first one that the integration the Selenium Base provides is with Azure. So if you look into the Azure integrations, it has two kind of integrations. One is Azure Pipelines. So it gives a detailed instruction on how to set up your Azure pipeline, right? You might not want to do it in Azure uh, pipeline itself, because these tests should be if you're having a pipeline, it should be tied up with your development pipeline, right? So you once you someone is making some developer is making a commit or a build, these tests should run automatically in that pipeline. But this gives you pretty good idea on how to deploy your test in the pipeline itself, right? So if you have a pipeline, you can. So if you look here, let me increase the fonts. So if you look here, the pipelines have builds, releases. So you can either plug your test in the builds, assuming that your dev pipeline is already in the builds, and your dev already has a release pipeline. So you can plug your test inside this, right? The other integration that SeleniumBase provides us with Jenkins. Again, uh,
But you're not sharing.
oh, sorry about that. Can you see now?
Yep.
Yes, Sumit, we can see.
Okay, so let me go through one more time with Azure Pipelines, right? Uh, so Azure Pipelines is one integration that SeleniumBase provides. Again, as I said here, your pipelines are either builds or releases. Uh, Considering that your dev pipeline is already in the build or releases pipeline, so you can plug in your test inside that dev pipeline, right? You don't want to create a separate pipeline just for the test purpose. This is an example, but generally that's not the case, because you always want to plug in your test with certain event triggers. Either it's a build or a release. So whenever it might be a continuous deployment platform where as soon as a developer makes a commit, it does a build and it kicks off your test automatically, right? Once that is done, the same way we go with the releases. Uh, this way, this again, as I said, this is a basic pipeline just for test, but it gives a clear idea on uh, the trigger points of how these tests should be triggered. So you can create this as an image or create this as a job and then plug this job into the pipeline itself, right? So the whole idea here is that you create a job and then you either run it independently uh, or you plug in with your dev pipeline. The same way it provides some integration with Jenkins, which is a very basic. So this is the raw implementation of Jenkins, right? So when we look here, it's actually installing uh, uh, the browsers, the XBFB, which is basically your display drivers, uh, and then Chrome drivers and Firefox drivers. This is a raw implementation of Jenkins. So what I mean is it doesn't take into account uh, uh, the wrapper that we have built in our framework, which is Tox. So Tox takes care of most of the things that are mentioned here. And also when you are running through Jenkins deployment, you don't want your to install anything on the master or master Jenkins, right? So you want to run it separately, either in a grid or in any cloud platform, right? But if you are short on resources, you can definitely put it on Jenkins itself, but then that's not a recommended way of running Selenium test on Azure pipelines or Jenkins, right? We don't want to create a big load on Jenkins because it also depends on how much memory and CPU your Jenkins server is running on. You can create multiple slaves where you can push those commands, but then that makes it more complex in order to do that. So the better way is to spin up your grid server or run on a cloud instance. The same way there are multiple integrations with, I won't go into Python. It's basically an integration example uh, with JavaScript and Python, right? So that's what it is. We basically will rarely use this. Uh, and then we have Google Cloud integration, where you're building through Jenkins. Is the same way as Azure, the base implementation. And then you have the grid implementation as well, where it's basically sending you back to how you create a grid, which we have already done. And then the most important that I like is the Node uh, JS integration. So what basically it does is it gives you an integration point where you create an execution platform through Express server, right? So the people who don't know about Node is basically uh, your JavaScript platform where it's mainly used for creating servers, right, and serving uh, different files or APIs, right? Uh, what goes alongside with Node is npm, which is Node Package Manager. So it's basically the same as pip, which is the Python package manager. Basically, it includes all the libraries that people have built, and you can utilize those libraries. So we are going to use one of those libraries, and then we're gonna run one of our servers, which will serve uh, the execution UI from where you can execute it. So the first thing that we need to do is we go into the Node.js website and install, depending on you have a Mac or a window, you can install any uh, any installation. It can be a 64-bit or 32-bit based on your machine configuration. And then you can definitely install it in Linux environment as well. We generally install Linux on Linux environment when we are running uh, it on any cloud platform, or if you have your own Linux machine. So install Node from this website, and then it does include npm as well. So the first thing, once I install Node, I will go in and look for the version of Node. So I'm running 12.18.1 version. The second thing that I want to do is I will uh, go into the repository of SeleniumBase and look for the integrations folder. And then I will go into the Node.js folder where I can see some files already there. I will walk through each file. So the
Uh,
first file, yep.
Sumit, sorry, you may have to increase the font,
How
the
do I do
zoom
that?
out.
Okay, let me show that here. So if you go here, you will have these files which you're gonna use. Uh, so I will go through each file and talk about what they're doing, uh, and then we will create that particular server, right? Uh, so once I go into it, so the first file that I have is uh, package.json. So if I open this file, I will increase the font on this. All right. So what it tells me is that this is the basic list of your npm module. So anything that goes into that, it will whatever you need to install, you mention it here as a dependency. So I'm installing Express as one of my dependencies for my server, and then I'm gonna start my any script that runs. It will run uh, in this on this path, right? Any file or any script that I'm running. So in order to uh, install Express, what I will do is I will I'll do npm install -g means global, and well I will install Express globally. I don't need to do that, but I like to have Express as a global package rather than just in that repository. But if I do uh, npm install, it will automatically pick up that package.json file and install whatever is there in package.json, right? So I don't need to run this global command. I can still do an install of whatever is there in the JSON file. But then I'm looking to install Express globally because I am going to use it multiple times. And once that is done, what I need to do is I need to serve, uh, s- create my request UI. So what I will do is I'll create a file called server.js. And once I open this file, let's see what's inside this file. So this is basically JavaScript. Uh, if you're not familiar with it, I'll explain a little bit on what each line is doing. So basically, this is your import statements. Uh, the same way we did it do in Python. We do it like this here. Here we are providing a variable to those imports so that we exactly know what we are going to use next. The function wise, we are creating functions, which is basically run my first test in Chrome. So it will execute a command in the command line where the command is pytest, my first test.py, browser is Chrome, right? So it's the same as talks, but we are running it through a UI, right? Same way, run first test in Firefox is going to be same, and then Firefox, right? Run Chrome with demo mode, and I'm going to add additional parameter demo mode to it, right? So these are all my functions that I've created. Now to create the routing, right? So as soon as I click on this route of my app, right, which is the home path, it's going to serve me index.html file. I'll open the index.html file as well. And then when I run this path, which is run first test in Firefox, it's going to send this file send this to index.html and then redirect to the home page. And it will also execute this function, run my first test in my Firefox as well. So what is basically doing, it's serving this index.html file, but redirecting to the home page uh, and executing this function, which is my first test in Firefox, which is this function, right? So it's basically executing this command. So once I show you the index.html, it becomes much more clearer. The same way, there are multiple paths that are entered here. And then eh, I'm going to set up a default function where whenever I hit or start the server, it's going to tell me. Uh, so whenever I hit this path, which is localhost and the port 4445, it's going to start listening to the request. And then it will log, it will send a log message saying server is running at this. And if you do Control C, it's going to stop that server, right? So that's all we need for server.js. And let me show you the index.html as well. So this is basically your UI where you are mentioning uh, that you need to select an option and you are giving a form tag. Basically, this is a form where you can do a submit and you have a method put, which is basically your express method. And the action is that you're running your first test in Chrome. So this is the path that express will take. And it once I go to the server, if I look at that path, so this is my first test in Chrome, it's going to execute this function, right? Once I do the same way with multiple, create multiple uh, options, and then it's all tied back to server. So whenever I use this action keyword and use this path, it's going to go to server.js where it's going to look for that path. And then based on this path, it's going to execute that particular function. by executing the function, it means it's going to execute these commands, right? So let's see that in action. I'm going to serve my server.js file. So all I need to do is give a command called node, and I'm serving server.js file. So if I do this, so now my server is running at this location. So if I just go to the browser and copy paste this location, so this is my index.html file where it's showing me select an option, which we have seen here. So if I go to index.html file, my H1 is select an option, which is what I'm getting here. And then I have submit type where my action is this, and the value is basically your text, which you are showing on the UI, right? And then once I go there, I can see run test in Chrome, run test in Firefox, run test in demo mode or not. So if I click on one of this, it should start executing the command, and based on the command, it will start executing the test as well. So I clicked on run test on Chrome, it's executing those tests. And if I run test in Firefox, it should run test in Firefox. So it opened the Firefox browser now, and it's running the same test in Firefox. So this way you can create multiple options. You can create, let's say you are creating a test suite, say run uh, uh, my application, a particular workflow, let's say my application login on Chrome, right? Or on Firefox or on any other browser, right? Or you can create multiple commands saying that run on dev environment, right? Run on prod environment. So this gives you a very good ability to pass your test to either the developers or the business users, and they can actually execute the command from here itself with a UI. You can play around with the UI. This is a very basic UI, but you can definitely play around with the UI. And once that is done, if it is integrated with Slack, it will send that notification to Slack. If not, you can display the results directly in the HTML page itself. Because once you execute the command, you will get a result back. Or you once you have the result back, you can definitely get the HTML report and attach that HTML report in this UI itself. So when they click on that particular report, they will open. They should be able to open the execution report with any success or failure details residing inside. Uh, so the implementation is up to you on the UI part, on how detailed you want to go in the UI implementation. How what are the requirements that are coming from dev and business people that they want to see in this UI. But this gives you a very big platform in order to start executing tests through a UI, right? You can have this UI not just for Selenium base, for any Python framework that you are creating. You can or any framework basically that you are creating. You can create this UI and then you can execute. So maybe Java, JavaScript, or Python. You can follow the same way and create a UI for your test executions, right? And another thing is that you can also uh, create multiple options here where you're running regression, create a plan to run regression. So you can basically build this on top of your Tox environment, right? So if your Tox environment has multiple environments and users or developers are confused which environment to run, you can create a simple UI with more description on it. So if I say run test in Chrome. So if I just change my index.html file, which says run test in Chrome, and then I add some details on alongside this form, which is basically a P. And it says mm, running F. So you can have more details listed out here. So if I have to reserve this because I've made some changes. So if I do this and reload, so you can have more details here. So you're running on dev, you're running test on Chrome. So it's basically up to you how you want to make your UI and what details you want to put in there. It depends on what your user requirements are or your dev requirements are, right? Any questions on this? No. Okay. The other part that I wanted to talk about is spinning up the Jenkins instance on Azure. Again, uh, I'm going to be really fast on this because we have already done this. But what I'm going to do is uh, I'm going to start from Azure Marketplace itself to show you how to spin up that instance. So once I go to Azure Marketplace again, so I can have raw implementation of Jenkins. I can install Jenkins on a Docker container. I can install Jenkins on a VM. But what Azure Marketplace is giving me is coming pre-configured with Jenkins when I'm spinning up a VM, right? So it's saving me a lot of time to do manual installations. So I'm going to go with this. So I know there was one option with Microsoft. It has been deleted. I don't know the reason why it was deleted, but it was a free instance. This is going to cost you a little bit of around 0.034 per hour. Right? Not too much, but again, the Microsoft version was free, right? Because it was basically uh, delivered by Microsoft as an instance. I guess there was some, there might have been some issues with Microsoft offering a free version and other apps, other companies offering with some price value, where they might have said that this is not helping our revenues or something like that, right? So I'm going to go and click create. I'm going to create a new resource group. So resource group is very important in the sense that if you want to manage your costing, right? If you're deleting anything or removing anything, you might have to do it uh, manually one by one. If you're deleting the resource group itself, so whatever resources are getting attached to this instance will get deleted automatically. So it will have a disk, it will have memory, it will have a CPU, it will have other things. So everything will get deleted. A public IP, so everything will get deleted. Otherwise, if you don't delete it manually, it's going to cost you, right? So even if uh, I go to this VM and I delete this VM, my public IP still remains, right? And if it is static, it's going to remain and it's going to keep costing me without me knowing that that deletion didn't work uh, on the whole resources, but only for the VM. I'm gonna create a new resource group called Gen. Okay, virtual machine name Jenkins. Region is fine. I'm gonna use a spot instance because it costs me less. I'm gonna go with the default size, 1 vCPU and 3.5 gigs of memory. And I'm going to use the password as authentication. I'll keep it as Jen as well. So I'm going to go next to disk. I don't want a premium SSD. It's going to cost me more. So I'll go with standard. Networking is fine. I don't need to change anything here. Management, monitoring, boot diagnosis are enabled by default. I don't need a tag. The tag is basically to restart and having audit trails on what you're doing. Okay, so we're gonna do review and create. So this is the cost that is coming with me. So the Jenkins itself is costing me this much per hour, and this memory and CPU size is costing me this much. It's less because uh, I'm using a Spot instance. Now I click on create. So the deployment is in progress. It will take a bit of a time. In the meanwhile, I'll again show you one more thing is so if you look here, the image that we selected, it does give details on what to do next. Uh, your application URL is going to be this. Default port is going to be 8080, and your installation path is going to be this. Right? And if you want to log into the database that it comes with, uh, which is a MySQL database, you can use your username and password on this. And it will also tell you if you want the admin password, you can do a cat here where your password is stored. So we're going to do that and unlock Jenkins. Before that, we'll wait for the deployment to be completed. So once I am done with the Jenkins, I'll also show you how to remove the resource group so that next time, this is very important because it's going to cost you if you don't do it properly. So our deployment is complete. Let's go to the resource. So we can see here we have a public IP address that has been given to us. And let's do an SSH on this. I'll create a new. So our username was Jen at the rate public IP address. Yes. Password is what we provided with Jen. Okay, so I'm inside Jenkins now. Uh, all I need to do is find the password for it. So I'm gonna go to this path and do a cat on it. I'll do a sudo cat. It's asking for the password again because I'm sudoing it. So this is my password. But before going to that, I need to go into this public IP, right? Okay, I think I'm missing the port. So this is the admin password where I need to put. So once I'm done copying the password, I can unlock Jenkins. Continue. So the first instance it will ask me, do you want to install the suggested plugins or you want to manually select the plugins? I recommend install suggested plugins. It comes by default with all these plugins, but later on also we can add more plugins if needed. So it's going to install all these plugins. Once that is done, you can create your first admin user if you want. If not, you can continue as admin. So you can change the Jenkins URL here if you want. I'm going to do start using Jenkins, and I have the Jenkins with the admin login. So I can basically, if you don't have the created the user, you have to keep uh, this password handy because it will keep asking for this password. Uh, it's better to create a user with your specified username and password, and then you can have create your new pipeline or freestyle project or multi-configuration project. I generally so this way you can have okay. And the same way, like we discussed last time, what we need to do. The two installations that we need to do in plugins are going to be Shining Panda and Talks. Don't forget that, and the Python plugin, and then we can start adding those things here. The post build actions will have one more plugin that we need is for Teams. For Teams integration, we need Office 365 connector plugin. If we are going to deal with Slack integration, then we need the Slack plugin, right? So for every connection that is outside Jenkins, there should be there is a connector attached to it. If it is a common platform, if it is not, you might have to create your own connector through Jenkins. If it is something in-house, then you might have to build your own. Any questions? One thing that I want to again show is how to delete the resource group. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to home. Uh, I'm going to virtual machines. The first thing that I'm going to do is remove uh, this. And I just wanted to show you if I delete VM from here, what will happen and what will happen to the resource group. And then we'll delete the resource group. So it will take some time to delete. So once it is deleted, we'll lose all the connections here. Yep. So connection to this is closed and I'm defaulted back to my username. So it's gone now. If I go back to home and I look at resource groups. So if you look here, I still have these many resources running. So I'm running a virtual network. I'm running a public IP address and all these, the disk has not deleted and the network interface is not deleted. So all I need to do is delete the whole resource group. Otherwise, these things will keep continue giving me cost, right? Because they're still in my resource group and they're still running, even though my virtual machine is not in existence. So I deleted the resource group. Now everything will get deleted and I won't be charged for any of these items. Right, so it's very important that we keep that in mind. So if I go back here, if I refresh it, I should not be able to see anything. The whole my instance should be gone, and it should throw an error. Yeah, if you see it's still loading, it's not able to find anything with that IP. Yeah, so nothing is there on this. The resource group is still getting deleted. Yeah, it takes a bit of a time to delete. but once it's deleted, then you won't be paying for any of these items. So going back to the integration part, uh, so these are all the integrations that we have. Very useful if you want to use any of these. The only thing that I left is Docker, which is again a very basic implementation of uh, putting the whole Python first and then Selenium base first and run these tests inside that Docker environment. But uh, the only thing is that you don't need this if you already have Selenium or any Selenium grid running in your infrastructure, right? This is a very basic implementation. We don't recommend this because it requires a lot of maintenance in terms of if you need to change anything, then you basically have to do it inside the container, right? All right, I think that's pretty much sums up the whole Selenium base. Any questions? So the resource group is deleted now. So if I go back to resource group, I should not be able to see Jen. It's deleted now. It's not going to cost me. All right. Any questions? Are there no questions because everyone understood or no one understood? All right, Kader, do you want to take it? Anything
Hey,
that you?
sorry, are you done with the session? I just
Yep.
joined.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got into another call, so it was my day job call. I couldn't come out, so I have
That's
to.
that's okay.
Um, and also, I didn't take the attendance. Just now, I took the attendance. Hopefully, did we have more than anyone else took attendance for today?
Yeah, I have covered it, Kader. Nagendra here.
Okay, you covered it, but I just took one download. 21 people. I don't know before how many were there. Apologies for that.
Yeah, no
Um,
problem.
Yeah, perfect. No, nothing, Sumit, if you have finished it. So this is your fifth week, right, Sumit?
Yep. So the
And
next, yep. So the next one is on the project. So what I will do is I will uh, end of day tomorrow. I will send some details like I sent for Tavern. I will send some details on what kind of projects we can do,
okay,
uh, and then we can in the last session we can review those projects.
perfect. And after that, we are starting this the next one, right? Robot framework or something,
Yep.
right? Next one,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good, awesome. So one thing that I may have to tell is the designer that we had, he's kind of a sick and he's out. So I know that there is certifications that we need to distribute was pending for Tavern and also for this. Nahendra, probably we need to make sure that we create a attendance list for this program as well, and also the cloud fundamentals. And I'm expecting my designer will come back next week, and then once he comes back, we will make the certificate once all, and then we will kind of put it in our Testoper teams for the people to take their own certificates. Okay, that's the only thing that I wanted to kind of share. Apart from that, my usual saying: talk to people, continue attending, continue developing, talk to people, talk to your company to sponsor us and help us to continue this good journey that we are doing together. With that, we can close the call, Sumit.
All right. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions still, we have some time to ask. Uh, if not, we'll close the call. All right, then thank you everyone for being here. And I will send the project details soon. It's not going to be a complex project. simpler, but meaningful. Right? Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.